So let's take a little step through the fintech landscape. So you've been in this area for quite a while now. So um, maybe let's look at a little bit chronologically, maybe 15, 20 years ago to now. What kind of changes have
Mm,
you seen over that time?
mm. I think the main change that I see, and I've been monitoring the space since 2010, the main change that I see is the fact that we saw a lot of, let's say, this displeasing attitudes coming from major financial institutions, lack of transparency, fees, high barriers to entry,
Mm,
inability to innovate, stagnation. So there was this push on, okay, what if there is another or an additional or an alternative value proposition out there? That's why we started seeing slowly neobanks emerging,
mhm,
payment space, payment companies emerging. Yeah, crypto came later. The wealth came a bit later. So I think most of the stuff that started with a bit of let's try to change the way financial institutions
mm.
operate.
And that
I
came on the
think,
heels of global financial
of
crisis.
course,
Was
that
that
I
was
think
that
that
kind of
was
the
the
seed
main.
of
I
it?
think that was the
Mm,
main catalyst. That was the
mm,
main pivotal point, the inflection point. I would say the initial attitude from the fintechs was to let's kill traditional banks, let's kill
mm,
traditional institutions. That, of course, didn't happen. And I think throughout the years, with all the waves we've seen, and remember, we also went through a COVID pandemic and all that, we are now getting into the space of let's work together,
mm,
let's unbundle value chains, let's co-create business models, and also let's share capabilities. And I think now, and we've seen a couple of interesting examples of big players, incumbents working with smaller startups or acquiring them later on, or
mm,
even providing them with capabilities to thrive and then maybe acquire them again. So we see a lot of moving pieces.
mm,
Currently, I think personally, I don't think we can still talk about finance without talking about fintech. I think for me, technology and finance are together by default.
mm,
And this is something from a cultural standpoint, it took me a lot of time to, and I'm still trying to convince that you can't talk about finance without talking about fintech. Like these things are not, they're
mm,
not different anymore. They are the same. So you can't talk about, let's, for example, banks if you don't talk about bank tech, or you can't talk
mm,
about insurance without talking about insure tech. So even the fact that we still try to use different words to talk
mm,
about the same thing, it still shows how the level of resistance, which is something which is very, very fascinating to see.
mm.
And of course, I mean, let's not forget again that we've got legacy systems, that we've got
We still have
compliance, that
legacy systems.
we still do, we still
But
see. And I mean, because also bear in mind that, especially for financial institutions, because they have to tick all the compliance boxes,
mm,
it's very difficult to do something unless they want to ensure that they will not be, that they won't be against regulation. And
yeah,
of course,
breaching it.
regulation is not progressing as fast as innovation is progressing. And that's
Mm,
something not only in financial services, but across any kind of industry vertical. Let's be very honest with that.
mm,
So probably why fintech started proliferating at that time is because they saw this gap in regulation that gave them the breathing space to start
mm,
excelling. I must say, though, numerous business models failed because they focused on areas which did not bring scalability and don't bring money. So, for example, you would see numerous failed neobanks that they focused on the customer experience, they focused on the
mm,
customer journey, they focused on the fancy marketing gigs, but they didn't have a real product that it would bring money. It
mm,
would actually make sense from a revenue point of view. That's why many of them failed. And
mm,
this is where I think currently we are at the moment where, yes, the fintech funding is keeping up. However, I think based on discussions I'm having with investors, with fintech entrepreneurs, they are very selective on what they fund They are not carried away anymore by the hype. And I don't think there is not much hype now. Maybe there is a bit of a hype in other areas, in other verticals, but they are trying to look on business models which are sustainable, they are unique, and they have a very specific growth strategy and ROI. That's very, very important. So it's not about how fancy you are, how your interface is very important. And of course, everything now is smartphone based, and all these because, and also the advancements in technology in the smartphone and digital has been pivotal for the growth of the fintech space in general. And also, let's not forget that incumbents are catching up. They're catching up a lot. And let's not forget that incumbents have a couple of things which are unique. They've got the money, capital to invest. They've got the trust, maybe in inverted commas, but they're still trusted institutions. They've got the regulation to support that, but they also have the capabilities and the capacity to do that. But the most important thing that they have is they've got the data, which currently, especially with the open banking regime and all this data sharing, because if you are a fintech startup, you need to test your business model. How do you do that? You need data. And that has been one of the biggest barriers to entry. And now, even if we have an amazing framework and open banking in Australia and other countries, it's still not working because you see the resistance, and also there is push now. And I was reading a piece the other day from a major financial institution in the US saying that, okay, you want my data, you have to pay for it. And then it goes into the question, who owns the data? Who is the curator? Who is the, all these kind of pieces that you try to open one door and then numerous more doors open. So what I think fintech actually did, to summarize, it tried to actually unbundle the overall systemic stagnated landscape of financial services by questioning practices and trying to ease things. For example, if it weren't for fintech, we wouldn't be seeing open banking, we wouldn't be seeing CDR, we wouldn't be seeing crypto, we wouldn't be seeing and crypto is another area which I'm happy to discuss, but we wouldn't be seeing also ability to utilize technology and connect technologies with areas which probably wouldn't even think about. I'll give you a very quick example. As you know, currently we see global crisis when it comes to climate change. We see a lot of things happening, especially with catastrophic consequences. We see lots of issues with floods and wildfires and all that. If you try to connect, very small example, insurance and reinsurance capabilities and utilize, let's say, quantum computing to simulate, you can have an understanding of risk and you can actually plan. So you're actually bringing a technological capability which has nothing to do with financial services and insurance, and you try to create a new type of capability to serve the purpose and simulate risks and make informed decisions. So I think this is where fintech comes in, to connect fragmented or connect elements which nobody would think they would be connected.
And we've got all these things coming through right now, right? It seems like they're coming through at the same time. AI, blockchain, quantum computing. Seems like they're coming through at the same time.
And as you probably know, the common denominator is data. That's the common denominator of all that, because all these technologies are amazing, but if there is no data, there is no use.
Right. So
and I'm also saying, and I've said it before, currently banks, they are not anymore vaults of money, they're vaults of data. So the data they've got, they're amazing. It's just a matter of how do you share, but also what do you make out of it. So I think it's not about garbage in, garbage out. Is you've got the data, what kind of data processing capabilities you have to ensure you've got meaningful insights for the meaningful decision making. So I think the new competitive war is not about who has access to the data, but who is able to make sense of that data.